Hey guys, uh, man, I really should think of a catchphrase to start my videos. Hey guys sounds a bit, I don't know, dry, I guess. How about what's up, bro, chacho? So, hey, my dude. Yeah, like that's not lame at all. Anyway, I'll stop with that. So, I've been watching Stranger Things because the final season is about to release, and I was obsessed with this show as a kid. It's still one of my favorite shows of all time, and I didn't realize it's one of my comfort shows too because I'm watching it for the fourth time now, and somehow I find it engaging and comforting too. But this time I do feel like I noticed some things that might be crucial for the final season, and of course I'm gonna do a very quick recap and give my thoughts on the first two seasons. By the way, this video will only contain my thoughts on the first two seasons because the first two seasons are very self-contained, and in terms of scale, I think scale and style, I think it's a bit similar. So I'll only cover the first two seasons here, but I will make another video on the third and fourth season, and another video on the Stranger Things stage drama, which is the first shadow. I'll definitely need a separate video for the third and fourth season because season four is that long. Like Jesus, it just goes on forever. Anyway, getting back to the point, I know people say fourth season of Stranger Things might be the best season, but I'm not very sure if I agree with that because I had some problems with the fourth season, which will be discussed in another video. But something tells me, in terms of storytelling and characters and engagement, I do feel like the first two seasons were much better. Part of the reason is because, in terms of scale, I think it was much smaller because it was very focused on where it exactly wanted to go. It had a proper direction, and the characters navigate the story so well. I did feel like I was way more connected to the characters as well. Let me give you guys a small recap of the first two seasons. Stranger Things starts with the vanishing of Will Byers. Will goes missing after a monster chases him, and we have no idea how it happened at that point. Parallelly, we are introduced to a girl with a hospital gown on, and she looks and acts weird in a very obvious way, who happens to be the protagonist of this show, 11. Then we are introduced to Will's friends, Mike, Dustin, and Lucas. These guys go in search of their friend Will in the woods, and they bump into Levin. Initially, they were just trying to help Levin, but later they find out this girl has superpowers, and she also knows where Will is, and that he's lost in an alternate dimension called Upside Down. Of course, since Levin isn't exactly good with words, she doesn't directly communicate with them, but she throws gang signs at them, and they put two and two together and figure out what the fuck is this ball chick talking about. One important thing you have to remember here is that they are naming the monsters from the Upside Down after the monsters in Dungeons and Dragons as an analogy. Somehow it seems to be working for them every time, like every monster they encounter is there in the game. I don't know how, let's just believe that for the sake of the story. So they theoretically figure out the monster, their weakness, and everything else about it from the game. Plus, a professor from the kids' school called Mr. Clark explain it to them. If they create a massive amount of energy to tear space and time, they can create an entry point to Upside Down. Alright, boss, I have to introduce you to some other characters who are just as important. Joyce Byers, who's Will's mother. She gets worried sick after her son gets lost, but she was hopeful. Find her son, and Will tries to contact her from the Upside Down through lights. Exactly how Will communicated is still a big question mark, since we only saw Joyce's point of view, but based on what we saw in season 4, when Steve and his gang tries to contact Dustin from the Upside Down, it looks like he might have contacted by touching the lights because that's what Steve did. Joyce ends up getting the message, and we get to know that Will is safe in the Upside Down. But how did he survive from a whole ass Demogorgon for an entire week while the others barely stayed for more than 5 minutes in the Upside Down? We have no idea about that. We have to see that in season 5, and season 5 will definitely have the answers to that question. Based on the stuff I've seen in the trailer, and there are other reasons too, but there are potential spoilers for season 5, so I'm not gonna mention any of that in this video. Because there was a scene where Joyce literally saw Will in the Upside Down, like from the real world. I'm not exactly sure how that happened too. I think it because Levin tried to contact Will and it created a massive energy, but it's pretty unclear as to how it happened. I'm just assuming since the contact happened, Joyce was able to see it, but they don't really explain it. Then cut to some other characters, Nancy and Jonathan and Steve fucking Harrington. Nancy's a typical innocent high schooler who falls in love with a douchebag Steve. I mean, at that point he was a douche, so excuse me for calling him a douche. They end up shagging, and Nancy's friend Bob gets killed by a demogorgon when the shagging happens, which makes Nancy feel guilty. And then we are introduced to Will's brother Jonathan, who is a creep, who also goes on a quest to look for his brother. Instead, he takes a picture of Nancy like a creep, like when she's shagging Steve, but accidentally ends up getting a photo of the demogorgon that killed Bob. So Nancy and Jonathan team up here to find this monster and kill it. Cut to our final main character, Chief Hopper. Chief Hopper is a genuine cop who tries to find Will. One thing you have to know about this character is that he lost his daughter to some disease, and it comes into play later. Hawkins Lab set up a fake body that looks like Will, and then they throw that body in a quarry lake. Joyce does not believe this because obviously she has communicating with Will, and she asks Jim to look into this body and to figure out like that's not my boy. Who is that? And then Hopper finds out that it's a fake body after he sneaks in. Then Joyce and Hopper team up to find Will. Cut to the kids now. Of course, I'm not going to deep dive into every little detail. I'm going to mention the things that are only important for the plot. While all of this was going on, you get to see how strong their friendship is, which is essentially the heart of Stranger Things. And then
Best friend.
Says who?
Says logic.
Why call bull on your logic? Because you're my best friend too.
Okay.
Levin is a kid who's still learning things about the real world. So Levin is still absorbing like how the real world works and TV. It's like a kid basically learning things. That's how Levin is introduced to us at the beginning. And I forgot to mention Dr. Brenner. So he's an evil doctor who experiments on kids. And throughout the series, we get to learn more about Levin through flashback portions that happens in Hawkins' lab, where she gets tortured and experimented on. Here we get to see that Brenner is using Levin to look for something in the Upside Down. We all know what he was looking for, but we get to know in the fourth season. But for now, we are clueless. I mean, Brenner figures out that Levin are with the rest of the kids, and he goes to the Wheelers looking for them. The Wheelers are the most clueless parents I've ever seen in my life. By the way, Jesus Christ, at least pretend like you care about them. So the kids flee the house and hide out in a spot, and Hopper gets in touch with them. Meanwhile, Nancy actually goes to Upside Down through a gate. And a very important thing to remember is demogorgons are drawn to blood. Whenever a drop of blood is shed, they will create a gate and get to the real world and take the person to the Upside Down. I think they were controlling them. Again, what did the demogorgon do with the bodies is unexplored. Again, season 5 has to answer that question, I guess. The show pretty much discarded this rule because we see a monster literally made out of meat and blood in the third season, but we don't see any demogorgons. I know some people might argue it's the mind flare, it's a high mind, why would it draw the demogorgon? But in multiple instances, there were blood and none of the demogorgons showed up. Or at least they should have addressed it. Like something is wrong. Like why? I feel like they just discarded that rule that the blood draws the demogorgon rule. But for the sake of this show, let's put that aside and get back to the plot. Nancy goes to Upside Down through a gate and makes it out alive, making her the first person to make it out of Upside Down in one piece. Cut to Joyce and Hopper, they get an intel which leads them to Eleven's biological mother, Terry Ives. Here we get to know that she sued Hawkins Lab and Dr. Brenner for taking her child away and for experimenting on people. But all of those details were taken down by them, and they electrocute Terry Ives and make her mentally unstable. Also, we get to know that Brenner had no idea that Terry was pregnant with Levin when the testing happened, which might make her the first person to have powers by birth. Because we see so many missing people posted, including kids in the newspaper. Plus, Henry Creel helps Levin, and he clearly has a soft corner for Levin, and he asks Levin to join him in his mission, which could be because she was born with powers, which also explains why she is the most powerful one out of all of them. Again, it's just my speculation. I could be way off or entirely wrong. Getting back to the point. Eleven finds out where Will is in the Upside Down. Meanwhile, Hopper makes a deal with Hawkins' lab to not to leak the experiments in exchange to allow him and Joyce to go to Upside Down through the gate in Hawkins' lab. to get Will basically. Joyce and Hopper rescue Will but gets strangled by the veins and he looks almost dead but he survives. Cut to Jonathan and Lance. They are trying to kill the Demogorgon back at Joyce's to help Joyce and Hopper with their mission, which is to rescue Will. Jonathan almost dies because of their stupid plan, but Steve shows up to that place to apologize to Nancy but ends up fighting the Demogorgon with them. In fact, Steve single handedly attacks the Demogorgon and lures it into a trap. Meanwhile, trained soldiers struggle to find the Demogorgon in the fourth season. I don't know why there are so many inconsistencies exactly how the Demogorgon works. Once you notice it, it's kind of hard to unsee it. Again, as usual, I chose to see past this for the sake of this show. Cut to the kids. Brenner gets to the kids, 11 kills all of the soldiers, and of course, blood draws the Demogorgon and it kills Brenner. I honestly have no idea how he survived. Don't even ask because I don't. In the second season, we get a clue that he is still alive, and in the fourth season, the man just appears out of nowhere. But how he survived, we have no idea. So the Demogorgon tries to kill the kids, but Eleven saves the day by killing the Demogorgon. And because of the sheer power, she gets stuck in the upside down after the fight. Meanwhile, Will is reunited with his family, and he's all happy, but he's still traumatized by the events that happened in the upside down. And he spits out a Demodog at the end of the first season, and that's it. First season ends. Jesus Christ, I thought I'll be able to finish this quickly, but good God, it took way too long to finish the first season. Alright, kids, let's take a small break and be back, and then let's talk about the second season. Hello there. Welcome back. Let's talk about the second season. Season 2 starts with probably the most hated character of this series, Kali, aka number 8. She's obviously a felon trying to run away from the cops and then she bamboozles her way out of it by using her powers. She can project things. That's basically her power. That's the intro. Like we don't get to know who Kali is, but we just see another experimented kid who has superpowers. That's it. And see, I think that happens in Pennsylvania. Yeah, this happens in Pennsylvania. And then cut to Hawkins, Indiana. We see Mike is still upset about the fact that Ellie is missing, but he still keeps trying to contact Levin. Steve and Nancy are still dating. Nancy is still struggling to get over Bob's death. Plus, Bob's parents have sold their house to hire a private investigator to find out about Bob, and this fucks her up even more. This causes problems in their relationship, which is kind of messed up because Steve is trying to do better and be a good boyfriend, but unfortunately, it doesn't work. Steve wasn't exactly a douchebag to start to begin with. He was just trying to protect his girlfriend, but I guess how he dealt with it was kind of douchey. But I'm really glad he didn't exactly change. I think it's still very consistent with how he was in the first season. But he was just trying to do better because this woman changed him, right? I thought it was good. Like it was a good character development, I guess, for Steve. So anyway, he goes on to become a legendary person later. That's I'll save that one for later. But I thought the transition from season 1 to 2 was pretty interesting. Will keeps seeing episodes of the Mind Flayer and he's clearly traumatized by the events that happened in the first season. He tries to move on and live a normal kid's life. We get a lovely Halloween episode as well. I mean, typical middle school things happen in the first half of season 2. Although I have no complaints about it because I love it. I love the characters, so I'm in for the ride. You know what I'm saying? Joyce is dating a nerdy guy called Bob. We get introduced to Max in this season. Her character doesn't necessarily contribute anything to the story at this point, but it's a story about a bunch of kids in school, so it's okay, I get it. But in my defense, I think Max is pretty cool. Cut to Hopper and Levin. Lemon makes it out of upside down through a random gate, and Hopper finds out. He doesn't live in a van anymore, and then she lives in the forest or in the woods for a while, and then I think Hopper has a gut feeling or whatever. I don't exactly know how he finds out that Levin is still roaming around the woods. But then eventually, Levin decides to present herself in front to Hopper, and then Hopper takes her in. Hopper doesn't live in a van anymore. He lives in a house in the middle of the woods with Eleven. Technically, he is hiding her out in this house to protect Eleven from Hawkins' lab. After a while, you can see Eleven really wants to meet Mike, and she's clearly having an identity crisis as to who she is and where her parents are and all that. Cut to Dustin, he sees a demo dog in a trash can at his house, and he chooses to raise him as his pet. Not one of his best movements, let's just say that. This Demodog quickly grows, like the growth of the Demogorgons are fast apparently, and eventually it ends up killing Dustin's cat. And then Dustin lures it into his basement and locks it up. And then, ladies and gentlemen, one of the most quoted duo of all time begins now. Dustin and Steve get together to kill this Demogorgon, but it builds in a hole in the wall and then escapes. And then cut to Chief Hopper. He gets a case where all the pumpkins in the farm are poison or rotten, and he has to investigate about this. And eventually, he finds out that it was not poisoned by anyone. Something is spreading from the Hawkins lab, like from the underground, that are killing these crops. So Dr. Owens, who is a new doctor, is appointed to clean the mess that Dr. Brennan is created, gets involved to see what's really spreading from the underground. And then cut to 11, she basically goes on a tour around Hawkins to meet Mike, and Hopper gets to know about this because she decided to use her powers in the middle of the day. So Hopper gets to know about this, and they basically have a quarrel since she broke the one rule that Hopper imposed, which is not to get out of the house. Cut to Jonathan and Nancy. They try to tell Bob's parents the truth, which is that she was killed by a Demogorgon, because, like I said, they are still devastated by Bob's death, and Nancy feels obligated to tell the truth. But before that, they get kidnapped by Dr. Owens. There we get to know that the gate that was opened by Dr. Brenner is not closed yet, and the vines have been spreading to their world all this time. So it's important that all the things that happen at Hawkins lab remain a secret, and Bob's parents can't know that, because if this secret gets out and if the Soviet Union gets to know, they will open another gate, and that's not good. Cut to Will Byers, he gets an episode again, and this time we see that Mind Flayer gets in, because Bob gives him this whole story about, you're supposed to stand up to it and fight it, but I guess Bob hasn't met a Mind Flayer before, so he stands up to the Mind Flayer, and he gets boinked. Mind Flayer basically gets into Will, and he gets not possessed, taken over by Mind Flayer. He's a host of Mind Flayer now. Will starts acting all weird because he's part of the high mind now. Joyce checks the Halloween records and figures out that the episode Will has been seeing are not episodes. They are in fact real. Mind Flayer has actually taken over Will. Then she confronts Will about this, and then Will accepts that, yeah, this Mind Flayer has been tormenting me for days, and now it has taken over me, and I can feel him in me and all of that. Also, Will explains that he has memories, as he exactly knows like what's happening in the upside down, and how far the vines have spread under the ground. Like, he's aware of what exactly is going around with the demodogs and mind flare and all that. He has an awareness. That I think that's what he mentioned as now memories. Will explained. So Will couldn't talk because he had a hard time explaining it in words, because the mind flare has taken over him. So he draws these vines, and then Bob figures out that the shape of the vines that he has drawn looks like Hawkins, implying that he has drawn Hawkins, which also means that the vines have spread under Hawkins entirely. And then there are few scenes explaining how the Mind Flayer controls Will and to what extent it can go. Like he likes it cold, and then how angry he gets. The changes in Will's behavior is basically what happens. I'm not gonna deep dive into that. I think it's better if you check it out. Will ends up in Hawkins lab because Owen's people burn the vines in the field. Since Will is part of the hive mind, that hurts Will. Cut to Jonathan and Nan. They meet the private investigator Murray to inform him about Hawkins lab and expose them. But he changes the narrative of the story because no one would believe them if they said there are monsters in Hawkins lab. So the story they cook up is basically a toxin got leaked from Hawkins lab, which killed Bob. The whole upside down Demogorgons story, they're not going to tell any of this because the people wouldn't believe it. I thought that was pretty smart and it logically made sense. Cut to 11, she makes it to her biological mom's house, Teddy Ives, only to find out that she can't communicate with her because she's mentally unstable because of what Dr. Brenner did to her. And then there she finds about all of this using her powers. And that's how she gets to know her past, and we get to know about Kali, who shared the same room with Levin when they were at the Hawkins. And they have also we get to know that how she was tortured and how Terry was just trying to save Levin, but she couldn't. There she finds out. I mean, they are in the sense not in the dream, but in the house she finds a photo of Kali, aka Levin. Using her powers, she figures out where Kali is. And since she saw Kali in Terry Ives' dreams, she thinks this is my mom just wants me to meet Kali 8 and figure out who this person is. So she goes on to meet Kali but it doesn't make any sense as to why her mom would just ask her to go and meet Kali because I don't think they are like biological sisters. What happened is they were trying to create a plot with that, but it went nowhere. Anyway, this whole Levin finding about herself had a very underwhelming ending, but I do see the vision. Cut to 11, she's in Pennsylvania looking for Kali. There's nothing much to say about this episode. It's the most hated Stranger Things episode. I personally don't think it's that bad because the point of the episode is basically 11 discovering who she is and where she belongs. She basically chooses Mike and gang over Kali because Kali is not a good influence, and she gets to know this because Kali forces Levin to kill and Levin refuses to do it. This makes her question herself as to whatever she is doing is that right, and then she obviously realizes this isn't the place for her, and then she uses her powers to check on Mike, and then she figures out that they are in danger, meaning that Levin, Will, and all of that, and his mind flare problem is going on, and then she chooses to ditch Kali and then go back to Hawkins. See, I think it's a great idea because Levin is someone who was mistreated by pretty much everyone around her since her childhood. Later, Hopper does the same thing by controlling and lying to her. So her finding a place where she can call home and find people who treat her with love makes so much sense for this character. But was the arc convincing or was it delivered in an interesting way? Absolutely not. I don't think it's terrible, but it was so rushed and the placement was so horrid. Plus, Levin had a good reason to leave Kali. But why is she going back to Mike? That wasn't convincing. I wish they gave a stronger reason. I mean, I wish they explain why Levin needs them rather than why Mike and Hawkins needs Levin. And then, of course, with Will's problem, there was so much going on in Hawkins. I really couldn't care less about this subplot. Cut to Will. Owen talks to Will and figures out. I mean, he doesn't exactly figure out what mind flayer is, but he understands that it's connected to him and it's spreading all over his body like a virus. Will later says, "I know how to stop the shadow monster." I mean, that's what they call the mind flayer, and he leads us Owen's soldiers to the tunnels underground. And later we get to know that that was a trap, which means Will is working as a spy for the mind flayer. Since Will is a spy, he leads all the demodogs to Hawkins' lab, and now the place is filled with a bunch of demodogs. Also, Joyce, Bob, Owens, Will, and Mike are also trapped in the Hawkins lab. In the process of getting out of the Hawkins lab, Bob dies. That's another thing that Stranger Things does. They introduce a new character and make them so likable and kill them so that you would feel like there's a loss and there are consequences to this, and it is a dangerous game. But they will never kill a person from the main cast, even with Max in the fourth season, right? They were too afraid to kill her. It kind of ruins it if you ask me, but that's the show's template, I guess. Now, except Bob, the rest of the gang reunited with babysitter Steve and his gang, along with Nancy and Jonathan. Mike figures out if Will isn't aware of where he is, he won't be able to snitch on them to the mind flayer, and they can communicate with Will and figure out a way to put an end to this. So they take him to a small room in the backyard, cover the place with newspapers, and basically cover the place so Will isn't aware of where he is. No Snub delivers the best performance here. I would say one of the best at least. So they try. Joyce, Jonathan, and Mike tries to talk to them about family and all the memories they share with Will to get to Will's heart, but nothing seems to get to him. Later, they realize Will is trying to contact using Morse code, and they figure out what he's trying to say. And the Morse code basically translates to close gate. But unfortunately, in the buyer's house rings, and Will hears this, but they quickly sedate him. But still, a couple of demo dogs show up to that place, but coincidentally, 11 makes it on time. This might be one of the sickest intros I've ever seen. A perfect way to show that 11 is still the hero of this show. 11 joins the gang, and then there are, and now they are being all wholesome, if you know what I mean. The setup was worth the moment, you know what I'm saying. 11 goes to close the gate and Hopper basically, and then Hopper and 11 make up, and there a wholesome conversation happens. There Hopper opens about his daughter to 11. I feel like it's a circle moment for Hopper's character. Meanwhile, the rest of the kids go to the field to burn the vines underground, the tunnel basically. And before they get to that place, Billy gets in the way to in looking for Max. Basically, it's just another hurdle for the gang, and they have to figure out a way to get out of it. It's another subplot that really doesn't add much to the main plot, but it's fun. Like I'm not complaining about it, but it's just not worth explaining. I think. Cut to Will, Jonathan, and Nancy, along with Joyce. Since fire is Mind Flayer's weakness, Joyce puts Will in a very heated room and crank up the heater as much as she can. Parallelly, Steve and the kids burn the underground, and then Levin closes the gate. That's how that scene ends. And cut to Murray. Murray gets the evidence, and they finally shut down Hawkins' lab. Bob gets a funeral because now they know that Bob is dead. With the tailored truth they decided to put out. Meanwhile, Owen helps Hopper to get a fake birth certificate in the name of Jane Hopper. It's pretty sweet if you think about it. The kids go to prom, which is one of my favorite scenes from this show. And the show ends on a pretty good note. I mean, this is the only season that ends on a pretty good note. And it was really wholesome, like the way it ended. Even like how the characters, like Steve drops Dustin, and every girl rejects Dustin, but then Nancy dance with Dustin. And there was a small character development as well, because initially we see that Dustin tries to give Nancy pizza. She totally rejects him, but now they are friends. There are so many good moments in just that one scene, and so many like circle movement for characters. I thought it was a solid season, honestly. All right, so that was long as fuck. So let me directly get to my review. Stranger Things is definitely one of my favorite shows of all time. I do think in terms of sci-fi drama, fantasy, this show is one of the most memorable experiences ever. First two seasons does a really good job at building the characters and the world, and of course, even the very idea of the show is very exciting and interesting. But if you ask why this show works despite the flaws and despite the cheesiness and despite sometimes it does fall under the cliche horror teen category, but despite of all this, it still works. I think it's because of the insane chemistry between the characters. I really can't think of a show that made me root for every character, and every character had a solid arc by the end of season 2. Even the duos are so interesting. For an example, Dustin and Steve duo is arguably one of the best duos ever. Not just the actors, I'm talking about how the show creates a need for two characters to go on the same mission. For an example, Nancy's search for Bob and Jonathan's search for Will brings them together. Even the Dustin and Steve combo wasn't random. Steve has fought a Demogorgon before, which creates a need there. The USP of this show, I would say, the friendship and the chemistry between the characters. Even the side characters, Max wasn't necessary for the story in any way, although in season 4 they use her. But since they gave a backstory and how she connects to the kids' story, you don't really notice or even accept that Max doesn't really contribute to the story until this fourth season. I could say the same thing about Murray and Robin too. Plus, I think even the world building is really exciting in Stranger Things. You get to know another dimension and the monsters, and they have a set of rules, and they set limitations to this world, which makes it a bit grounded in the first season too, at least. Plus, I think Stranger Things does a really good job at unraveling the mysteries. Like, if you ask me the best season, I'd have to say season 2, because it take this up a notch in terms of scale, and the stakes are high in the second part, and we get to know who the big bad villain is, which is what a sequel is supposed to do, believe me or not. But the show was still very grounded. It was still very focused on the mysteries of Upside Down and how these characters navigate in that world. But in the later season, I do feel like season 3 and 4 just lost sight on where it exactly wanted to go. which could be because of the scale, but that, I mean, fourth season kind of touches it, but still, I think season two and one did it better. I don't know. I might change my opinion after saying checking season three and four again, but I do feel like season two is one and two are better, and two is the best if you ask. So I think the focus just shifted. Oh, it just got too big. The writers just couldn't keep up. That's what I feel like personally. Season 3 felt like a summer popcorn flick, but it didn't add much to the story. Don't get me wrong, I love season 3. I'm not sure if it has aged well because, for the most part, I remember it was just fun. At that time, I liked it, but I'm not sure if I will like it now, so but I have to check it out. I'll be finding it out very soon. So, what you see in season 4 is basically the mixture of season 3 and 2. You get this cheesy jokes and action storylines and a plot line that's not related to the story, but at the same time there are good story beats which connects back to the roots of the season 2 and the heart of Stranger Things, if that makes sense. But there are also like some storylines that are low-key annoying. For example, Susie storyline in the fourth season. So yeah, but I'm not gonna talk too much about season 3 and 4 because there's a separate video coming on for that. I'm just mentioning why season 2 and 1 2 season 1 and 2 is better in comparison to season 3 and 4. That's why I had to mention it a little bit, but I'll give a detailed explanation in another video. In terms of performances, I think Noah delivers an amazing performance. Plus, Billy does a really good job as well within the limited amount of screen time he's given. There are some other points which I want to talk about, but I'll save it for the next video for an example why I think Levin might be one of the best protagonists in TV show world basically. I'll explain it in the next video. Overall, I think season 1 and 2 are solid sci-fi thrillers despite the cheesiness and its flaws. I think it's a fun watch. Plus, it's probably one of the most memorable experience in terms of TV shows, I would say. So yeah, that's about it. So I'll probably see you in another video.